Hello, you're watching Kitco News, and I'm Michelle McCory, and I am pleased to be joined by technology innovator and entrepreneur Alex Mashinsky, the man that helped disrupt analog phone service by developing voice over internet protocol and has been leading the movement to unbank. Alex has founded at least 7 startups with exits over $3 billion and is currently the CEO, chairman, and co-founder of Celsius, a leading crypto lending and interest-yielding blockchain-based platform. Alex, great to have you with us here on Kitco.
Thanks, Michelle. And that's a mouthful of an introduction, so you did a great job at it.
And that is trying to encapsulate the essence of you, Alex, and it doesn't even really scratch the surface. But we have so much to discuss here today. I do want to start with the Bitcoin 2021 conference. It's been a week since we were both there in Miami, largest crypto conference ever. And it was a very unique event, lots of energy, but probably one of the most significant developments was the announcement by the president of El Salvador that he is making Bitcoin legal tender. Now, since then, the country's parliament passed a historic bill by an overwhelming majority, and now Bitcoin is legal tender in El Salvador, meaning that Bitcoin will have equal footing with the dollar, which became its official currency 20 years ago. And making Bitcoin legal tender means that shops and businesses must accept it for goods and services, and they can choose to express prices in the currency. So what do you think the implications of this are?
So obviously that's great news. And we were both in Miami. I think the community was super excited about that. We had the president appear during the conference with kind of promising to get this passed. And it's great to hear that it actually got done. I think worldwide, we're going to see this happening again and again because many countries will have to make a choice. Do they continue to print money? Do they peg themselves to the dollar? Or do they offer their customers the freedom to go and choose other options, like, for example, paying in Bitcoin or Ethereum or some other, crypto asset?
All right. Well, one of the issues, of course, by using it as an actual functioning currency is the volatility in the price. I mean, if you have Bitcoin as legal tender, which means shops and businesses need to accept it for goods and services, how can it function as a currency with all the volatility?
Sure. So Bitcoin historically has not been a great form of payment, right? The US dollar is a phenomenal form of payment. It's a horrible store of value. And Bitcoin is exactly the opposite. It's a phenomenal store of value and a bad form of payment. So I think Bitcoin needs to mature. It's going to probably take 5 to 10 years for it to mature and stabilize. Until now, anyone who made any payment in Bitcoin of the last 12 years is probably sorry about that because they would have rather kept that Bitcoin and used their fiat. And at Celsius, that's what we offer you, right? We offer you to basically borrow fiat against your stablecoin, against your Bitcoin in the form of a stablecoin over fiat currency, pay your bills, do whatever you need to do, but hodl that Bitcoin.
All right, so to your point, Alex, Bitcoin is a better asset than it is a currency. And there is some debate on whether we should be regarding Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency or a crypto asset as a store of value. And that's the position that many like Michael Saylor take, that it is indeed a store of value, that it's an asset like a treasury reserve. And they've also made the case that it being seen as an asset rather than a functioning currency reduces the threat that it poses to governments and central banks, and therefore reduces the threat of more severe crackdowns. But now with El Salvador using it as a currency, what does that mean? Because we're already hearing from the IMF saying that it has a number of economic and legal concerns. JP Morgan saying that a sovereign country recognizing it as legal tender has mechanical implications for its treatment in much larger economies under tax law, banking, and financial regulation. So if it is a currency, is it a bigger threat to central banks? And does this open the way for a more severe crackdown?
So, I want to differentiate between central banks and banks in general. So banks in general see Bitcoin definitely as a huge threat because it endangers their monopoly and their ability to effectively create money out of thin air. So obviously, most banks are going to be against such practices, and many central bank leaders come from the banking industry, so they basically sing the same song, right? So I think most of the kind of centralized or traditional finance world is definitely looks at this as unstable and threatening, unproven technology. At the same time, the people worldwide are seeing, they're fed up of seeing rates being manipulated, seeing banks effectively have predatory practices, banks never being held responsible, especially after the 2008 collapse, where just a year later, bankers were paid all-time record bonuses. So all these things are what's driving the Bitcoin revolution. And governments, including central banks worldwide, effectively represent the interest of the people. And if the people are voting for Bitcoin, central banks need to follow and deliver what the people are asking for.
That may very well be the case, that they should be representing the interests of the people, but many would argue that that is not actually what's happening. And again, the bigger issue here is that the argument has been put forward that it hasn't been seen as such a giant threat to central banks, as long as it's seen as a store of value, as an asset, and not so much as a currency. But if El Salvador adopts it as a currency, legal tender, which it has, and if other emerging markets also adopt it as legal tender, does this then open the way for a more severe crackdown? That's the concern now.
Yeah, we'll have to see. We have to wait and see what's going to happen. I think, I do think that other countries will try to do the same thing. But the leaders of those countries are probably doing it for political reasons and not for economic reasons. And the banking system will have to retool itself to support these type of changes. And we're starting to see the basics of that already happening in the United States. For example, Visa announced their support of USDC, which is a stable coin, right? The OCC in the United States have issued 4 licenses for federally chartered banks to effectively custody and issue and manage Bitcoin and so on. So we're seeing the beginning of integration of this decentralization and centralized finance, but we're at the very, very early stages of it. And the crackdowns, like if you look at what's happening in China, China already decided that they want the digital yuan to dominate their financial system, and they're going to clear the way. They're not going to accept the digital dollar. They're not going to accept stable coins. They're not going to accept anything that's denominated in a different industry, in a different currency, or Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? So each country has its own political and economic reasons. And it's great to see, again, Central America kind of jump into this. But we're very, very early stages here. And a change in the political leader there can reverse what was just voted in, for example. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say that this is the beginning of a huge wave. I think El Salvador is a trailblazer here, and we have to see if we can deliver on the promise of using Bitcoin as a form of payment, and then copy that to other countries.
Well, there is the expectation that a degree of FOMO is going to kick in other developing countries, and that they will take similar actions and similar steps. So if that does indeed happen, and if this El Salvador experiment proves to be successful, or at least not a disaster in the immediate term, and you do see other emerging market countries adopting Bitcoin, what does that do for the price of Bitcoin, Alex?
So today we have about 100 million or so participants in the Bitcoin ecosystem worldwide, which is a fraction of 1% of all the people that live on this planet. And one way to grow that user base is to throw these shows like we were both in Miami, and convince others to join us. And another way is to, again, to get one country at a time converted. So obviously, the larger the country, the faster the conversion. And we need larger countries to make these type of decisions, right? So if we can get Brazil, or if we can get Nigeria, if we can get countries with large populations to accept this as legal tender, the number of Bitcoins out there is pretty much stable. It's obviously maxed out at 21 million. You're going to see a huge explosion in the price because just the adoption of all those users is going to create tremendous new demand for the Satoshis in circulation. So I think organically, the way we're doing it right now, when it is not happening fast enough, and we need to accelerate that. And it would be great if we can get, again, ambassadors to cheer for us who are running, or presidents of countries. At Celsius, we found that most of our new business development is happening because a Celsian is in Visa, a Celsian is in iHeart, a Celsian is in this or that bank, and they're the ones opening the doors for us. So I think the same thing needs to happen with all the other digital currencies being adopted by countries and by regulators. So only when you can show that you can do good and do well, you can basically get this broad adoption and stabilization, right? The broader the adoption, the more stable the Bitcoin, the Ethereum becomes, and then it can serve not just as store of value, but also as a form of payment.
Well, what does this adoption by countries, with El Salvador leading the way, mean for your price projection? Because you've been very accurate with your previous forecasts. Earlier this year in January, you said that you saw Bitcoin trading above 77,000 by the end of the year. How does this change your equation for that price projection, if it does? In other words, where do you see Bitcoin ending the year?
I also said that we will revisit the 30,000 range, and everybody was upset with me, but unfortunately, I was right. I do see us actually going higher. I think we will go higher than 100,000. And the reason for that is that we effectively flushed all of the leverage in the system, and we found our support at 30,000 or so. And now we're rebuilding with additional long-term holders, right, or hodlers. So I'm seeing, again, price acceleration because, PayPal and Visa and Venmo and all these customers that are new to crypto, Revolut, Robinhood, and so on, all of these new customers and their hundreds of millions of users are just getting into the cryptocurrency. So the government continues to print money, continues to devalue our currency, and more people are realizing that the true inflation should include the increase in the money supply, which in the last year has been 40%. 40% of all the dollars ever created were minted in the last 12 months. So I think that will create a new additional increased demand for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other alts. And I'm very optimistic, especially after visiting in Miami and seeing the energy there, the excitement, the community coming together. It's just been phenomenal. I mean, we got to meet over 5,000 of our members in the Celsius community, shake hands, take pictures, tell stories, celebrate, all of the wealth that was created through our community. And, that is not going anywhere. I mean, that's going to accelerate and going to get stronger and stronger.
So bottom line, closing the year above 100,000 is your revised prediction, and which you said you correctly called all the price moves along the way.
Well, at least some of them. I think all the leverage is out.
Okay.
So we have very broad support here. And it really, look, China may do something crazy and it's going to crater Bitcoin tomorrow, but overall, the trend is up to the right. And then it really depends on what do we have weak hands at 70,000 or 90,000, so on. If people hodl, if people sit on their coins, then we're going to break 100,000. We may reach all the way to 160,000 this year, and that's I'm sticking with that prediction.
All right, so Bitcoin could hit 160,000 by the year's end, unless, as you say, China does something unexpected and derails it. But it's not only China that can cause massive price swings and volatility. Tweets from Elon Musk have also had that effect. Now, you've called Elon Musk a Bitcoin tourist, and there's a sense that many in the Bitcoin community are growing tired of him pulling the strings. And they're advocating for his influence to be reduced and for there to be less of a reaction to his tweets. In fact, one of my favorite shows was asking how many Bitcoin market moving tweets does Elon Musk have left, with the idea that each tweet, in fact, lessens in impact on the market. So do you think that Musk's tweet influence could be waning?
Well, when you say cry wolf every time, eventually people get tired of you, right? But I think Elon came to the crypto community for the right reasons. He understands the power and the, kind of like the uniqueness of the Bitcoin community. But when he started jumping on other coins like Dogecoin and others, and then denied Bitcoin, I think he lost a lot of credibility. And him seesawing yin yang, going from I love Bitcoin to I hate Bitcoin, I'm going to accept Bitcoin, I'm not going to accept Bitcoin, really created this feeling that he's in it just to get followers and get the get the publicity, and not in it to help others or create wealth or advise others on how to do better. So I called him a tourist because anyone who comes from fiat land to crypto land and is coming in here for the wrong reasons and then leaves for the wrong reasons is a tourist. And Michael Saylor, Jack Dorsey, all the other people, you can see their conviction, you can see their understanding of the technical and the financial sides of this revolution. So they're A+ ambassadors for crypto and for Bitcoin. But Elon does not get that grade from the Bitcoin community.
And therefore, do you think his influence is waning over the price of Bitcoin with his tweets amongst the Bitcoin community?
So he does have a very strong following worldwide. And I think inside the Bitcoin community, I agree with you, his influence has waned, but he is preventing others from joining because other people who don't know as much see him leaving the Bitcoin community, are basically asking themselves, well, I was thinking about it, but I'm not going to do it. If Elon is leaving, then he knows better than me. He's a billionaire. Probably something is wrong with Bitcoin. So that's where Elon is hurting the growth and the adoption of this community, where, again, this is the first time in history that the average Joe got in on the next big thing in ahead of the institution, ahead of Goldman Sachs, ahead of JP Morgan, ahead of all the other guys. So taking this away from people and leaving them with their traditional banking relationship, where they have to pay fees to withdraw their own money, they have to pay inactivity fees, they have to pay overdraft fees, and so on, or predatory charges on their credit cards. All of that is being solved by companies like Celsius and others, because we're here for the community. We're here to build a product that is always acting in the best interest of the community. And we were really hoping that Elon was here for the same reasons.
Well, one of the issues that Elon Musk brought to the forefront was the idea of sustainability, of the environmental concerns regards Bitcoin mining. The president of El Salvador said that his country is going to mine Bitcoin using geothermal energy generated from the country's volcanoes. So certainly clean energy there. And this has become a very big trend, the ESG compliant, green energy friendly Bitcoin. Now, to that end, your company Celsius has recently announced that you've invested over $200 million in Bitcoin mining in North America using renewable energy. Tell us about that, Alex.
Sure. So we have over 110,000 Bitcoins on deposit from almost 1 million customers worldwide. And seeing the crackdown in China, made us realize that for us to maintain and secure these Bitcoins, we need to get involved in securing the Bitcoin network. And the only way to do that is to have mining capacity. Mining capacity is profitable, it generates Bitcoin, but it also secures the network. And we were concerned that first, China is about 65% of the mining in the world. And second, we don't know what they're going to do. All of that could disappear overnight if they really crack down on the entire capacity, which would put the entire network in under threat. Also, the arguments that Bitcoin is bad for the economy, bad for the for the environment are just not true. In any industry, and I've been in business for 35 years, if you want to build up new capacity, new additional wind power, solar, hydro, geothermal power, you need demand. Without new demand, you cannot really, it takes much, much longer to replace a coal plant or a nuclear plant than it is to build capacity for new demand. And what Bitcoin does better than almost anything else is that it creates that new demand for that power. So we are very excited that we got to put our system in facilities in all over the United States where there's access to hydro, wind, and solar energy. And we are a big consumer of that energy, which allows these companies, these energy companies, to invest even more. So it's a very good relationship, which allows us to increase or grow the production, grow and strengthen the electrical grid, and allow all of us to benefit because our community and everybody else is benefiting from a more secure Bitcoin network. So I think the narrative that Bitcoin is bad for the environment is being told by people who actually don't know anything about Bitcoin or how mining is done, and they might be looking at a problem that Kazakhstan have or China has. But the reality is that almost every survey that was made showed that about 70% of all the Bitcoin production worldwide is actually done already from renewable sources.
But the majority of the mining to date has taken place in China, and
which is using renewable sources. So if you're looking at where the miners are, because there is a map of where the miners are, you would see that they're mostly connected to the hydro dams and the Three Gorge Dam or the Shenzhen dams or other regions where there's tremendous amount of hydropower. You mentioned geothermal in Iceland. More power is being consumed in Iceland for Bitcoin mining than by the entire population in Iceland. So, and it's all geothermal, right? So I think we have to always remember who is driving that narrative, and we can make the same argument. Look, every Tesla car is plugged into a grid, and half of our grid, if not more, is from fossil fuels and from natural gas, right? So we can claim very easily that Tesla is ruining our planet, even though they're allowing cars to drive electric cars, but those electric cars feed off a grid that is using coal and natural gas, which are fossil fuels. So I can turn any argument on its head and show you how any company that's using energy, gamers who sit at home and play games, who are using servers and farms and computers, are ruining our planet, right? Because anyone who consumes energy, in effect, is consuming that, natural gas and coal produced power. So we all agree we have to move off that. And the uniqueness of what Bitcoin does is that you can take Bitcoin miners and put them right next to the production, right next to the solar production or the wind production. You cannot do that with most other industry. You cannot take the Tesla car and drive them to where the wind is or drive them to where the sun is, and so on. So actually, Bitcoin is serving as almost like this battery that is effectively converting unused power into stored energy, because Bitcoin is stored energy, right? That's what it really creates when you generate a block.
And to your point, it actually helps with the development of renewable energy sources because it creates investment in them.
Exactly. Like our $200 million investment is funding wind and solar, additional wind and solar production in North America. Because otherwise, you get penalized if you actually push too much power into the grid. You get penalized if you, because you're basically disrupting the 60 hertz that this grid is running on, right? So all those things are very important things that, again, most people that tell you about this don't understand. I actually wrote a patent about that actually how the modern grid runs back in 2000 that kind of created some of the ISO system that we're using today. So I'm talking about this from a deep understanding of how we are actually creating and distributing power across North America.
Well, Alex, the environmentally unfriendly narrative, accurate or inaccurate as it may be, has been used by government and Bitcoin detractors. We just had a Senate hearing on Wednesday. U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren was calling for lawmakers to take a more direct approach to address what she calls the problems posed by cryptocurrencies, saying that it's created, and I quote, opportunities to scam investors, assist criminals, and worsen the climate crisis. Now, the green energy push and the initiative like the Bitcoin Mining Council has largely addressed that, and developments like you've just discussed. But there's still the idea out there of Bitcoin being used predominantly for nefarious activities. Let's listen to what Senator Warren had to say at that hearing, and I'd like to get your response on the other side. Let's take a listen.
Crypto has become a haven for illegal activity. Online theft, drug trafficking, ransom attacks, and other illegal activity have all been made easier with crypto. Experts estimate that last year more than $412 million was paid to criminals in ransom through cryptocurrencies. And unlike other payment systems that make it tougher to move money illegally, a key feature of crypto is its secrecy. So just in the past few weeks, cryptocurrencies made it possible for hackers to collect the ransom, to release the Colonial Pipeline hack, and to free JBS, the world's largest meat producer, from paralyzing cyber attacks.
So what is your response to Senator Warren, Alex?
Look, you can use a hammer to build a house, or you can use a hammer to break the windows. That does not make the hammer a good or a bad thing. So the technology behind Bitcoin, the stable coins, the blockchain, the open ledger is something that's going to be with us forever. We can choose to treat it as a hammer that breaks windows, but all that's going to do is going to allow other countries to move faster than us. And we can already see how China is at least 5 years ahead of the United States in creating a digital currency. 90% of payments in China today are electronic, using Alipay or WeChat Pay and so on. So they're already 10 years ahead of us in that form of basically adopting that. And for every dollar that is used in Bitcoin for illicit activity, I would bet you that there's $100 that are used in dollars for the same illicit activity. So the banks, the largest banks in the world, paid, I think, $16 billion in penalties, just in penalties for money laundering last year. So when Elizabeth Warren is talking about $400 million in total activity, that is nothing. That is a drop in the ocean compared to the illicit activity that is happening every day using the US dollar and other currencies, other fiat currencies. So the issue is not Bitcoin or not Bitcoin. The issue is that we do need to have better enforcement, and Celsius, as an example, is working with regulators on KYC, on AML, we're registered with FinCEN, we're working with all these different authorities to make sure that we take out all the bad actors. And I agree with that we should continue doing that, but painting the picture in a way that it's all Bitcoin's fault, that if Bitcoin didn't exist, none of this activity would happen, is a little bit amateurish and just incorrect.
Well, unfortunately, Alex, in the world of politics, factual accuracy and the narrative being put forward are not always very connected or linked. And the concern is, regardless of whether it's accurate or not, when you've got Warren saying things like that, when you've got Yellen also putting out the idea that it's used for nefarious activities and therefore requires stricter regulation, will it be the premise that government uses to enforce more regulation?
Well, if it is, then we're all going to move to El Salvador and enjoy the benefits we have over there. So I think, look, we live in a free world. We live in a world in which, again, the politician's job is to represent our best interest.
In theory.
In theory, but Elizabeth Warren built her reputation over the last 30 years or so over exactly that. And I welcome the opportunity to exchange ideas with her and convince her that she's coming at it from the wrong point of view. Because I've spent my entire career basically bringing power back to the people. You mentioned voice over IP. Creating voice over IP was taking the power from the phone companies and deliver it to the average person. We're using voice over IP right now for free, effectively. Yeah. And that was not possible. You know, AT&T's plan and Verizon's plan was to charge us $3 a minute for this communication. So the same thing with money. The question is, should money be managed by banks who are toll collector acting in their own interest or in their shareholders' interest? Or should we enable this peer-to-peer system in which we can all act in our own best interest, but we do need to create new tools and new capabilities to eliminate the type of nefarious activity that currently is being taken advantage of? I can tell you that in the beginning, the early days of voice over IP, we had a lot of users who used voice over IP for bad purposes. And the government did not come and shut down voice over IP. The government found ways to effectively regulate and enable, separate the good players from the bad players, and empower the internet, provide that connectivity. And that's what made America. If you look at our economy today, part of the reason we are the reserve currency of the world and we have this powerful tool is because of the internet. The internet is a huge component of our GDP and of the power of the dollar. So I urge politicians, I urge leaders not to make the mistake of short-sighted political gain and basically throw the baby with the water out of the window, right? So we are very close to that because too many people, again, are representing the wrong interest and making the wrong arguments that are not here to help the people basically gain value or create financial freedom, financial independence for themselves from this amazing technology.
Well, we'll go from voice over IP to money over IP. But first, I want to touch back on the other side of the ransom narrative. And we did see Bitcoin slipping after news came out that US officials managed to actually recover most of the ransom paid to the hackers that targeted the Colonial Pipeline. And court documents said that the investigators were able to access the password for one of the hackers' Bitcoin wallets. And that sort of had some people concerned that, hey, if the government can't actually recover my Bitcoin, maybe it's not as safe, and maybe I'm better off, for arguments, taking my bar of gold and burying it out in my back garden, or putting it in somewhere and having a map like a pirate with X marks the spot. And I know the government can't get it then. So what do you say to that narrative, that the fact that it was recovered by the authorities sort of startled some in the Bitcoin community?
Well, of course, if the safety of the Bitcoin protocol is not there, right? If anyone can basically unlock any wallet, this will be a huge problem. It would be a catastrophic problem for Bitcoin. But if that was true, then $1 trillion or $2 trillion worth of value would disappear overnight, because if anyone could open that, I mean, you have Satoshi's wallet just sitting there with tens of billions of dollars. And if you can open it in any way, you can take all that value and move it away, right? So I don't believe that the US government or any other government has access to this network. It's true that the US government seized that server, the server in which the wallet was resident, and they may have had a way to basically monitor communication in and out of that server because of a court order. And through that communication, they may have been able to detect or unlock the key that is necessary, the private key that is necessary to access the wallet. But that does not mean that the Bitcoin protocol is a danger. So it's important to separate the two and understand that yes, the government does have certain powers, and it does have certain rights and access, but that does not mean that Bitcoin is not safe, or that the hash that is created to basically encrypt Bitcoin with this cryptography that has stood 12 years. No one has been able to break it for 12 years. I believe that Bitcoin has proven itself to be resilient and safe. And I don't see this action as something that is threatening the future of Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the derivative chains that are relying on the Bitcoin blockchain.